Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Creepy Classics. With me today is Lawrence.
What's going on, guys?
And we may be joined by some others here later on. I'm going to post the link to it in the chat here. But what we're going to be doing today, basically, is, and for all future episodes, is we're going to find creepypastas from around the web. Be borrowing from a lot of the famous YouTubers who do it. Today, we'll actually be borrowing a lot from Mr. Nightmare. That's where I took all the content from today from. And we're just going to play them and comment on them as they play through here. So
That sounds good.
I'll go ahead and get one started up here. Oh, don't want video file. I want to just share screen. Actually, I guess I do want to share a video file. We'll get this right, don't worry.
Eventually. 10-hour live stream.
I don't think I have any audio.
Number 5.
Do you hear it?
Yeah.
Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house to catch the opening act at a local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized
Love
my
the
phone
voice.
wasn't in my pocket.
Oh, yeah.
I checked the table we were sitting at the bar, the bathrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered, gave out a low, raspy giggle, and hung up. They didn't answer again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause and headed home. I found my phone laying on my nightstand, right where I left it.
Okay.
Number 4. When I was a kid, I was always the last kid to get picked up by the bus driver to go to school. One day I was waiting for the bus by myself, and a bus with no kids pulled up.
I ain't getting on that
The bus driver smiled and told me to hop on.
I don't think that's the actual
I just had
bus.
a bad feeling. I said, "Where are the other kids?" He said, "We will go get them now. Just get on." He got more and more pushy, but didn't do anything crazy. I just kept saying no, and he shrugged and left.
There's a link
The
if
real
anyone
bus
wants to
pulled up
join
a few
in.
minutes later. I went to school and my parents didn't know until I mentioned it that night. Looking back, they were pretty worried. I remember them scrambling to make a few phone calls. Number 3. A few years back, I rented an apartment for
Yeah.
a friend of mine.
I
He had
wanna be
recently
there.
bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened the door and I got a quick peek. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was
What's going on
damp,
in this house?
yellow stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit, and
think it was my
cockroaches
house.
everywhere.
Yeah.
No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door.
No, it's human shit,
Then she
dude.
turned up the radio even louder. The next night, I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed, looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then, the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she stood there. "You should lock your doors at night," she says, and walks out.
Like,
The
you
next
shouldn't be in
morning,
my
I hear
house.
someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside, and I can smell death from that bag.
These are all supposed to be
At this
true
point, I'm
stories,
scared
too, by the way.
shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask them what the hell is going on. The guy is as scared as me. Apparently, she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch, staring at him holding a power drill. Come to think about it, now I know what was in her hand. At this stage,
shit.
I'm basically shitting myself. I call the cops and they know all about her. Apparently she's a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it.
You can damn well try.
The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute, it's like she was never there.
Jesus.
I never see her again.
Good.
Still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep.
Was she hot?
Number 2. I was about 15 minutes from finishing the night shift at work when there was a massive crash on one of the windows in the office, so I get up and go check it out. Someone has thrown quite a sizable rock through one of the windows on the front of the building. This is made especially weird because I'm working in the industrial district at 11:30 at night with none of the other businesses open.
There you go.
I go back
Better
to my
background.
desk, put a quick call through to security to let them know, and decide to head home. As I'm leaving the building, I'm freaking myself out about it more and more and end up running to my car, getting in and taking off. I'm almost home and I've started to calm down a bit when I realize that I didn't unlock my car when I got in. It had been unlocked the whole time. I do a quick check with my hand in the back seat for any possible murderers that might be hanging around there, but there's nothing there. Fast forward about 30 minutes. I've called a friend of mine who says he's out drinking, so I decide I'm going to join him.
Okay.
I jump on my bicycle and start riding over. I'm doodling along the road on my bike. It's a nice night and I'm in no big rush, just enjoying the moonlight when I hear someone riding behind me. I straighten up and stick to one side of the road. He passes me really slowly, and when he's right beside me, he shoots me a smile, and I can describe it as purely insane. I kind of flinch and am taken aback as he rides on. That's when I realize he's riding my mom's bike. Needless to
What?
say, I sprint the hell home. When I get there,
That's fucking
sure
crazy.
enough, her bike is missing and one of my car's doors is open. The back left
He
one.
was in the car the whole time.
I was driving and had no need to open that door. Number 1. I worked at a campground on night shift, 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. every night. It wasn't bad. I would bring in my PS2 and game a good portion of the night,
PS2.
only having to deal with 1 or 2 people on busy nights. It was just me in this little 8-foot by 8-foot shack, with nothing around but dark all night. My first week there, the other third shift guy who was quitting told me about this payphone a few feet from the shack where I worked. He said it rang every night at 4:17 a.m., just once. It was probably just an automated test call, he guessed. He's never answered it himself. I go for a few months with the job. It was the middle of the summer, so most nights I had the windows closed, so I couldn't hear the payphone go off. Mid-August, I started leaving the windows open during the night. Sure enough, at 4:17 a.m. every morning, the phone would ring once. The ring even sounded creepy, like the payphone was submerged in water and then put where it sat. One night I got up the nerve to answer it. I set an alarm at 4:15 and would go wait at the phone until it rang. When it did, I answered it, but there was no sound, just dead air like someone was on the other line but wasn't answering. I said hello a few times and hung up. I did this every night for a week with the same results. I didn't think anything of it and left it alone after that for about a month. The first week of October, I decided to answer the phone once again. I set my alarm and when the time came, I answered the phone. I repeatedly said hello into the phone. Then I heard what sounded like someone inhaling through clenched teeth. The voice that sounded was rough and sounded like he had gargled gravel. He said my name,
That's you,
my
Rick.
complete
Oh,
name,
shit.
first, middle, and
That
last.
was the dude.
It was a voice I've never heard. My voice caught in my throat and
He
I
said
hung
his
up.
full name.
I rattled some change into the payphone and hit star 69.
I bet it was his friend fucking
The number
with him.
had come from California.
No, I came from
I
California.
lived in Indiana.
Oh, that's where you're from.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Shout out to Indiana.
He's a Hoosier.
All right, that's all for that one. So let's see what's on this next one. I just blended them all together.
This one's gonna be good. I can tell from the music.
I remember this just vaguely, since I was little at the time, maybe 7. In my old house, my room had its own floor. It wasn't even supposed to be a bedroom. It was more of an attachment to the attic.
I like the
closet
pacing
type
of this
room.
better.
The people that owned the house before us used it as a playroom for their daughters. My room also had a huge closet door that was attached to the attic. The closet was elevated up so that you would have to climb a set of wooden stairs to get into it. It had a big sliding door, and it was completely packed with toys and other junk from my childhood.
What?
Since I was little at the time, I always got scared of being so separated
I
from the rest
saw-
of my family and having that huge closet in my room. Then there was this one night. I
You
was
just show a
laying in
closet.
bed, afraid after watching a scary movie with my family.
It's
Then
pretty
I heard the
effective.
sound of a toy fall over up in the closet. I jumped out of my bed and ran to my parents' room. They told me there was no one in my closet. They saw how afraid I was, so they let me sleep in their room that night. The next
Watch
night,
this.
I had kind of forgotten about it until I heard it again. The sound of a container of Legos spilling out everywhere up in the closet. Again, I ran to my parents' room and told them about it. My dad was starting to grow impatient with me. He reluctantly agreed to let me sleep in their room again. The next day, me and my mom checked the closet, and there it was. A pile of Legos lay on the floor, spilled out of the container. I thought this was proof that somebody was in my closet, but my mom assured me that it simply fell over. That
And
night, my
knocked
dad
open the
locked
door?
his door. He said he was tired of my nonsense. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there completely silent with my young
Tired of
boy
your
imagination
bullshit.
running,
Waking me up every
waiting for
night.
another sound to come from the closet. It was probably about an hour before it happened. It broke the silence. The sound of the closet door rolling open with force.
What? Fuck
The
that.
moonlight
like the
shining
sound
through my
effect.
window illuminated the figure standing by my closet door. I let out the most horrific, ear-piercing scream you've ever heard, as pure terror swept over my body, a feeling that I still remember today. The figure jumped down from the closet and ran out of my room, and out the front door of my house.
The
My
fuck?
mom ran up to my room in shock, as my dad ran downstairs trying to catch whoever it was, but he never did. The police never caught the man.
This dude just has someone living in his closet.
When I was in 8th grade, I
Yeah,
went on a school trip
how
that
the
was called
fuck
the
do you explain
Louisiana
that one?
Tour. It was mostly going around to significant sites in South Louisiana. One of the places
Hey,
we
that's our
went
neck of
to
the
was
woods.
Myrtle's Plantation,
Yeah,
which
right.
is considered
There it
to be
is,
one of the
Myrtle's
most haunted
Plantation.
places in the country. There are all kinds of stories about the place, but at one point we were standing in a room as a part of a larger group, and the tour guide was talking about something. I don't remember what. As I'm standing there, I start to hear what sounds like someone hitting a piano key. After I heard it a couple times, I started to look around for the source of the sound. I didn't see a piano, but I kept hearing it, so I asked my friends who were standing near me if they heard it. They said no. When I heard it again, I said there it is again, they must have heard it. They thought I was crazy. So I went back to looking around the room. Everyone's eyes were on the tour guide except for one woman. She caught my eye and pointed at me, and then at her ear with a questioning look. I realized she was asking if I heard it too, and I nodded. At this point, the tour guide starts telling a story about a soldier who had died there, and that he played the piano, and multiple guests had reported hearing him playing in the night.
We need to spend the night in
I
that
honestly
place.
didn't know what to think.
Do they have
I guess I
beds?
still don't.
Yeah, you can
I
stay
talked
there.
to the woman as we were all leaving the room, and she said she heard the exact same thing as me, but her husband and son had not heard it.
Number
It
8.
was near Halloween time when my friends and I were telling ghost stories.
I tell you what, I
My
ain't
friend
going
said
into
she was
that
going to
fucking
tell a
woods right
story about her
there.
parents' first date. She said she
Did
didn't
you
like
get a
telling
DoorDash
stories
order?
since it was actually true, but we prodded her on. To cut to the chase, the parents had a nice, if awkward, first date, and around the time that they would have said goodnight, the male in the situation, who's my friend's dad, suggested that they go for a midnight hike up Provo Canyon. He apparently knew the place, since he had done a fair amount of rock climbing in the area. So the two drove up the mouth of the canyon, got out of their cars, and started hiking under just the light of the stars, since it was a new moon. At some point, the man starts getting a bad feeling, since the pathway ahead, which would pass under some trees, would be dark, and because it was getting quite late. He ignores the feeling and presses on. A minute later, the feeling came back to the man. He ignored it again and started walking a bit of the way into the trees when his foot hit something soft in the middle of the path. Under the trees, it was too dark to see just what this soft thing was, and the feeling came back stronger than ever. Instead of finding out what his foot had bumped into, he and the woman both agreed to hightail it out of there.
Oh, I know this story. You're
Years
gonna like
later,
this one, Greg.
after being married for some time, they were watching an interview with the serial killer Ted Bundy. In response to a question asking him to describe the time that he felt the closest to being caught, he explained about the night that he lured a girl into Provo Canyon and had just killed her when he heard some people coming up the trail. He explained how he hid in the trees just in time, only to watch some guy walk right into the body, and for some reason, just turn around and walk away.
Wow.
That's
My
fucking
school's
crazy.
library is open until 2 in the morning for the idiots like me that don't do their essays until the last minute. It's a pretty small building and most of the books are in the basement area called the stacks. Just to give you a quick layout, there's the big main stairs that go down to the stacks, a vending machine room, and the long hallway with the 4 entrances into the stacks. The stacks are 2 really big rooms on opposite sides of the hallway with a huge amount of bookshelves and study desks lining the walls. I was there around 11 p.m. last year. It was a pretty research-intensive essay, so I was down in the stacks working in one of the study desks, so I didn't have to keep going upstairs and downstairs again. I had been there for maybe 2 hours, and everyone except for a boy working a few desks down from me had already left. I was pretty zoned out by this point. It was an 8 a.m. class, so I didn't have much time until it was due, and I was sort of panicking. So it really pissed me off when I heard someone flipping through book pages really fast to make them do that loud whipping noise at the other end of the room. I sort of ignored it for a while, thinking they'd go away eventually, but they just kept doing it. After about 5 minutes, I got sick of it and started to walk over to tell them to knock it off. I get about 3 steps across the room and it just stops. I sat back down and it was quiet again, only for like 10 minutes before the flipping pages noise started again, only loads louder, like they'd grabbed a huge book that time. The boy started to get pissed off too, and he stood up and started walking around through the bookshelves trying to find them. It kept going, so I got up too and started looking around with him. It got really loud and it was pretty obvious where it was coming from by that point, so he started walking towards it. He was on one side of the shelves and I was on the other. We walked all the way down the shelves. No one there. We hadn't seen anyone come in the stacks, and we were on the side of the room with the entrances. No way could anyone have come in without us seeing them. The noise stopped again, and we both sort of just slowly walked back to our seats. I assumed it was just a fan or something in the other room, and I really needed to get my essay done. We sat down, and immediately the noises started again. It sounded like it was coming from right next to the guy's chair. He shoved his stuff in his
What would you
bag,
do if that
looked
happened
at
to
me,
you?
said, "Fuck this," and took off.
Just
Fuck
I was
this
out
and
of
take
there about
off.
5 seconds behind him.
I'd
I
say
still
fuck
won't go
this and
back in
take
the
off.
stacks at night, even when there's other people down there. This happened when I still had my fishing boat. It was a horrifying experience that
nice-ass
would never
boat.
leave us. Me and my
That'd
wife
be
departed from
that'd
the
be
East
scary
Coast
though.
for
Have some
our
shit
2-day
scary
fishing trip
happen
in
to
the
you while
North
you're out on the
Atlantic.
water.
The first
Oh,
day
yeah.
and night
It's just
we
like
were
no
there.
running.
We got a decent catch. At
You
night we
swim.
played cards while listening to music. It was enjoyable up until the next night. After a slow day at sea, we were playing cards again inside, this night without the music. It was at that moment that we heard the sound of a boat motor. We rushed outside to see a man piloting a crappy old motorboat with absolutely no lights on. He had stopped directly in front of our bow. The man was middle-aged. He had a beard and a baseball cap on. I went up closer and asked him if he needed help. He asked us if we had any spare gasoline. I apologized and told him we didn't. I asked the man if he was low on fuel and if he needed a ride back to the shore, but he declined. He claimed he had plenty of gas, which brought an awkward silence as me and my wife wondered why he asked us for gas then. The silence started to creep me and my wife out, mostly because of the way he just blankly stared at me. The only reason I could see was because of the deck light in the front of our boat. Other than that, we were surrounded by darkness. The man finally broke the silence and asked us if we had a good catch that day. I told him we didn't, still trying to be polite, even though the situation was odd and creepy. I asked the man how he was getting around in the darkness, but all he gave me was a chuckle, as if I had made a joke. I figured he misheard me. He turned his little motorboat around, and the last thing he said to us was, "Nice meeting you folks." He sailed off into the total blackness surrounding us. Me and my wife were completely weirded out. My wife told me she was afraid he was going to rob us. Being a fisher, you run into and make conversation with other sailors and fishers all the time, but I knew something about that guy was off. The fact that he came up to us so late at night, so far from the shore, and alone in that little motorboat, and the way he acted, we were both really uncomfortable, so I decided to turn out our lights and sail a bit north just to make sure
this
the guy
list
couldn't
is
find
coming
us
to me
again.
so well now.
Call me paranoid. Later that night, probably around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the disturbing and ear-piercing scream of my wife.
Nice.
I shot up from my laying position to see a man standing at the edge of our bed. I lunged out of the bed towards the man, but he was out of the cabin before I could even get out of the room. I heard the sound of the same motorboat starting before speeding away into the darkness again. We sailed all the way back to the shore that night and reported the man right away. Of course, nothing was ever heard of the topic again. We still have no idea what the man wanted or what he was planning on doing, but it still gives me nightmares to this day.
Dude, if I saw somebody standing at the edge of my bed, I'd lose my shit.
The way my bedroom was laid out was that across the room from my bed, there's a small alcove that does not receive any light because of the closet that's slightly in front of it.
My first instinct would be to grab my gun probably and just start firing
when it's dark. I was in
What if he
fourth year
takes
high
all your
school and I was
guns
trying to
before
sleep,
you can
but
do
couldn't.
that? Like it empties all
You know
around.
that feeling like someone's staring at you?
He's just standing there holding all my guns.
I couldn't shake it, and it just felt like whatever was staring at me had such malicious intent in it.
That's what the Night Stalker
I
did,
opened
Richard
my
Ramirez.
eyes, and my gaze was drawn to that dark corner of the room where I saw a hazy, darker outline in it. I got goosebumps, but thought that it was nothing there. I'm just imagining things.
No.
I closed my eyes again, trying to force myself to get sleep, but I can't shake that evil feeling stare. Then, there was a creak sound, the sound from somebody putting pressure on the floor. I opened my eyes again, and that shadow thing was in the opposite corner now. All my inner senses went ballistic, and I threw my pillow and blanket over my head as I cried myself to sleep,
I don't like that.
all while hoping that the thing wouldn't come closer. I know I didn't imagine or dream it, and it still sends chills down my spine to this day.
Fuck that.
It was the first time my family ever went camping together. I was 18 at the time.
See, those are the stories that freak me out, man. If you were camping, some shit started happening.
Yeah, dude, the woods, man. I don't know what it is.
It was mid-July, and I was actually excited to do it. We drove all the way out to the country. We didn't go to a camping site. My dad just parked the car on the side of a quiet road, and we hiked about a mile into the woods until we found a small clearing in the woods. We pitched our 2 tents, one for me and my siblings and one for my parents. So come nighttime, I couldn't sleep at all. Trying to fall asleep in that sleeping bag was like trying to fall asleep on the grass. I just couldn't get to sleep.
The grass?
I spun around and tried to make myself comfortable for hours. My little brother and sister had been asleep for a long time at that point. And then I heard the sound of the zipper to the tent zipping down.
Oh
hell no.
I looked up and saw someone poking their head into the tent.
No.
I couldn't see who it was.
Absolutely not.
Dad? I whispered.
No.
Whoever it was removed their head from the inside
Appreciate
of the tent.
you joining, Jess.
Dad? I said louder. Whoever it was quickly moved away from the tent, leaving it unzipped. I was so confused. I was sure it was my mom or dad just checking
Thanks
on
for
me.
staying with us.
So I crawled out of the tent and walked over to my parents' tent. I unzipped it and crawled inside. My parents were both in their sleeping bags. I shook my dad until he woke up. I asked him if he had just checked on us. He said no. I got chills as he said it. I then woke up my mom, hoping that it was her, but she groggily told me that she hadn't left the tent either. I got goosebumps all over as I came to the realization that somebody actually came up to our tent, opened up the zipper, and peered inside. A stranger. For all I know, some sort of psycho. I couldn't even really tell if my parents took me seriously or not, or maybe I just don't remember. But I do remember that I didn't get a minute of sleep that night.
Thanks, Jess.
My parents were on their honeymoon to Key West. When they arrived at the hotel to check in, they were told that the room would be non-smoking.
Jess, we actually
With my dad
stole
being a
most of
smoker,
them
they
from Mr.
requested a different
Nightmare.
room.
It's kind of
They
what
got
we're
the
going to
room
do with
switch
all
and
of
went
them
to
is
their
just
room. As they got
use
off the
stories that
elevator,
people have
the
previously
smell of
had.
fresh paint was overwhelming.
Because there's
Down the hall
thousands
there
of
was a
them.
painter with all necessary supplies laid out around him as he was painting the wall. As my parents walked past him, they casually greeted him, and the painter had absolutely no acknowledgement of their presence. Whatever. When they got to their room, the smell of
s'mores and
paint was
doors.
even worse in there. So bad it wasn't even bearable. So
What's
they
up,
decided to
Corey?
go to the front desk to change rooms.
Or Jonathan, whichever one of
When
you
they
is on the
explained the
account.
situation, the attendant looked very confused and informed them that there wasn't a scheduled paint job on that floor for that day, but agreed to change their room anyway. My parents go back to their floor to grab their luggage, and the painter is completely gone. All supplies cleaned up and gone within 10 minutes, and the smell of paint was completely gone. At this point, my parents were freaked out, but didn't think much of it and went to their new room. The next morning on their way to breakfast, they overhear a tour guide talking to a group. My parents tuned in when the guide mentioned the floor that they were originally supposed to stay on. Apparently a long time ago, there was a painter on that floor painting and fell down the elevator shaft to his death.
Fuck.
Now my parents don't normally believe in the paranormal, but after an event like this that they had no explanation for, it freaked them out a good bit.
It's a horrible way to go.
We're gonna add their channels in the description. You guys send them some love.
This story didn't happen to me. It happened to my cousin,
Doors
and
Jess
yet it
Graham.
still freaks me out thinking about it. This story is all too true. My cousin Nikki was on Skype
at
with
first
his
I
girlfriend
noticed the
Sam
girl, then I saw
around
the
1 in
little
the
creepy
morning on
kid in the
Friday night.
background. I'm like, oh
She
shit.
was asking him to come over
Yeah,
and
you did
stay
that
the
right.
night, but he didn't really want to drive over that late.
God,
Sometime
it's
into the
weird.
conversation, Nikki noticed the closet door behind Sam open a crack. Nikki pointed it out, and Sammy turned and looked at the closet. They both ended up ignoring it. It was probably another half hour into the conversation that the closet door creaked open even more. Nikki spotted it again and told Sam that her little brother must be hiding in the closet. She denied it and told him the window was open or something, so there must have been a draft. It was about half an hour later that the closet door completely opened, and somebody stepped out of the closet and walked out of Sam's bedroom.
No, y'all are good.
Sam didn't seem to notice, but Nikki got startled from what he just
Cable
saw.
channel 11.
He told her that her little brother was hiding in her closet.
Put that in the
But what
Check
she
it out,
said
everybody.
next scared Nikki shitless.
Check out Cable Channel 11.
She told him that she was home alone that night.
Yeah, you're good,
Nikki
Corey.
started
I
yelling at
enjoyed
the
it,
screen
man.
for her to lock her door and call the police, and that he would be over there as fast as he could. Sam just started to understand the situation as she turned and saw the closet door completely open. She ran over to her doorway
I still don't like
and let out
open
a blood-curdling
closets
scream
in a room I'm sleeping in to
before
this day.
slamming the
Dude,
door
I
shut
do
and
not
locking
either.
it.
That's crazy.
Nikki drove over as fast as he could while calling the police.
I
When he
always
got
look
there,
at
the
it.
front door was left open,
Even
so
when
he
I'm
ran
sleeping,
into
I
the
always
house
take
into
a look
Sam's
at it
room.
and just to
He
wonder,
knocked on the door and told her
what
it was
if?
him, but she wouldn't answer. When the police finally arrived, they busted open the door to find her curled up in the corner
there
of the
we
room
go.
in shock. She later told the police that she had seen somebody standing face to face with her at the doorway before shutting the door.
So what'd you
It
think?
was a dark and stormy night, the kind of stormy that I loved, thunder and lightning roaring, so I was staying up late watching movies. I lived with my dad, but he wasn't home that night. He was working nights. Anyway, after I finished watching the movie Forrest Gump for the 100th time, I decided 2 a.m. was a good time to
Me
get some
too.
shut-eye. I loved going to
Right.
sleep during thunderstorms. It was just enjoyable to listen to, but suddenly, I heard the sound of something hitting my window. It wasn't the sound of rain hitting the window, but in such a big storm I didn't think much of it and put my head back down. But a few seconds later, the same noise, Something hits the window again. This time I made the sound out to be a rock hitting the window. My heart started racing. It couldn't be my dad. He would call if something was wrong. Another rock hits the window. I found myself glued to my bed. I didn't want to look out the window, but whoever was outside surely knew I was up there. I had just turned the TV off. They could have seen the bright glare through the window. I just decided if I ignored it, they would go away. Another rock hit the window, and then another. It was getting faster. The rain started to lighten up, and that's when I heard the sound of a truck engine running down in the street. A much louder thump to the window was where I drew the line. I got out of my bed planning to call the cops. I ran down the stairs towards the phone, but as I passed the front door, I saw something. Something through the glass window at the top of the door. It was the face of a person looking through to me. It seemed like they had a smile on their face. I sprinted to the kitchen and called the police. They said there was an officer nearby, and they should be there shortly. Whoever was at the door started fiddling with the doorknob and eventually ramming into it, trying to bust it open.
Jesus.
I grabbed a knife for protection and yelled that the police were coming, before running back upstairs to my room.
I don't think he said that just
After about a minute, the ramming to the door stopped, and there were no more rocks hitting my window. I still didn't dare to look out the window, but I remember hearing the sound of the truck drive off. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a police siren outside, and moments later, the doorbell rang. I explained everything to the officer. I described the face as best as I could. Unfortunately, I couldn't provide him any information about the vehicle. If only I had looked out the window. I still regret not taking a quick look. There was never enough info for the police to catch these people. Not sure if they had intention of robbing my house, or much worse.
Greg, you know how many views we'd get if someone came and robbed you right now? during the live stream.
Yeah, I have it all dark in here too, dude, so I can't really see much anything beyond my computer screen, so that would suck.
Shit. It just gets better and better, dude, like the intro.
Oh, I don't like that. Come on now.
This happened to my dad when he was a little kid. I think it messed him up a bit emotionally, but he never admitted it. The story freaks me out just imagining it. So I'm pretty sure my dad was 10 years old, and he was home alone for whatever reason. He was watching TV in the living room.
Dad had shitty
It was the only
parents.
TV in the house, and all of a sudden, the TV just shut off. So he got up and turned it back on. It was an old shitty TV, so it wasn't weird at all. When he got back on his couch, it happened again. He got up once again and turned the TV back on, and again it turned off. He repeated this process a couple more times before he started to look for the remote. While looking for the remote, he walked over to check behind one of the couches and saw a man hiding in the corner, holding the TV remote. My dad described the man as having long, messy hair and a crazed look in his eyes. He gave my dad a smile, and my dad ran out the front door screaming like a little girl. He went to his neighbors who called the police. The man was still in the house when the police got there, so he was arrested. My dad told me that he still assumes the man was either homeless or crazy. Either way, this story is downright terrifying.
Yeah, why can't he be both?
My friend told me about something that happened to her when she was younger, about 8 or 9. She was walking home from school and got her key out to let herself into the house. Her single mom worked and came home later on weekdays. As she reached up to put the key in the door, her mom opened it in a dressing gown, having left work sick. Instead of greeting her, she looked straight past my friend and immediately said, "Who are you?" My friend turned around, and a man in a long coat hurried back down the path and down the street. Being ill that day had possibly saved her daughter from something potentially horrible happening to her. Before I start this story, I want to note that Jacob's mother is a drug addict, and his father really didn't have much wrong with him outside of being with his mother.
Yeah, it's one step
When Jacob and his father were asleep, they heard a series of loud banging, scratching, and moving noises coming from the mother's room. Jacob's father jumped out of the bed and ran down the hall and started slamming on the door. His mother opened it, yelling at him to quiet down and that he woke her up. He asked her about the sounds. She hadn't been awake to hear them. Jacob's dad would have assumed that she was on something again, but something was wrong. The window was open all the way, and the TV was moved across the room, still plugged in, and had the screen facing outside. Jacob's dad was reasonably scared. He shut the window, got his bat, locked the mother's room from the outside, and made her sleep in the living room. He stayed up most of the night. He woke up Jacob at 5. It was still dark out.
Welcome, Corey.
Jacob went out to the kitchen where his mother already was.
Corey, what's
A
up,
couple
man?
minutes later, his dad walked in, wide-eyed. He pointed at Jacob and his mother and held his finger to his lips. They both quieted down. They heard something shuffling around on the roof, going from edge to edge. Jacob's dad had the bat. They sat together in the room, quietly. Minutes later, the sound went away. Jacob's grandmother was called. She was asked if everybody could stay over there for a little while. She said yes and told them she'd come pick them up. Jacob finished eating and went to go sit on the couch. There was no TV in that room, so he sat in silence. He looked over at a door to an empty room in the hallway. The door was open. There was a finger wrapped around the side of it. Jacob screamed and pointed to it, and his father grabbed him and ran out. Jacob's mother followed behind. They went to a gas station and sat out front until they saw Jacob's grandmother's truck. Jacob described how unnatural the finger looked to me. He said it reminded him a little bit of a foam finger in length and width. It was wrapped clear around the door frame,
Was in this house
the door
a
itself
giant?
being latched on the opposite side.
Saints
They
fan,
didn't go back to
probably.
that house much after that. Once
Foam
they'd gotten
finger.
everything out of it, they never went back again. Nothing was stolen, and the window in the empty room was open.
That nothing
I
was
was
stolen
13 years
scares
old.
me.
I had the most isolated bedroom imaginable. Mix that with a wild imagination, and I was often up late at night, scared and paranoid, unable to fall asleep. My bedroom was a separate floor of the house, on the opposite side of my parents' room. They had no way of hearing
Sounds
what
like
was
my
going on
Second
in my
Street
room.
house.
So it was a seemingly ordinary night, with a bit of rain, but not a storm. I woke up and looked at my clock, and saw that it was 2 in the morning. I got an uncomfortable feeling right away, but I didn't know why. I then saw at the edge of my bed, there was a shadow of something roundish just over the head of the edge of my bed. My heart started racing until I realized it was just my hat. I sometimes hung my hat on one of the wooden poles at the edge of my bed, so I calmed myself down
You
and
have
fell
a
back
Nerf
asleep.
gun?
No,
I woke up
it's
again
all
around
bad.
half an hour later and was again startled by the sight of the shadow at the end of my bed. But after my brain started to fully wake up, I remembered it was just my hat again. This process happened one more time that night, probably another half hour later, and once again, I was startled by the sight of the shadow. I was
That's
getting
happened to me
thirsty,
before.
so I reached my hand down to the side of my bed, looking for my water bottle, but I instead found something else. My hat. And at that instant, I felt my heart drop into my stomach, as I almost fell out of my bed trying to turn the lamp on. The light revealed the face of a man, peering over the edge of my bed, staring right into my eyes. I let out the highest pitched scream a boy could possibly produce, and ran straight past the man, and down the stairs of my room. I felt the man try to grab me, but I managed to open the door and run to my parents' room to get my dad. My dad got the baton from under his bed and raced to my room, but he was too late. When we got back to my room, the window was wide open. Apparently the man jumped out onto the patio roof outside my window.
Man, that would be some traumatizing
When I was a
shit to
kid,
just wake
I had
up
a
to a
huge group of
stranger in
friends
your
that
room
all
like
happened
that.
to be on my block. On the weekend nights, we would always play manhunt, aka hide and go seek for older people. It worked out great because since we were all neighbors, we used all the front and backyards and even the woods behind our houses.
I've never called that.
We
I've
had
never
a
heard
rule,
that
though,
called
that we
man.
couldn't go out more than a
Yeah,
we
backyard's
called
length
that.
into the woods.
Yes.
I always used the same hiding spot, and nobody ever found me. I always hid behind an old rusty barrel that was thrown into the woods years ago. So on this particular night, there were only 6 of us playing. My friends Joe and Raj were on my team. We quickly dispersed as we were the first to hide. I ran to my usual hiding spot, through my backyard into the woods behind the barrel. Usually I would see the flashlights of the other team shining through the backyards and the woods, but it was unusually quiet this time. And then, I finally heard footsteps nearby. I didn't see a flashlight, so I assumed it was one of my teammates. I whispered Joe and Raj's names, but then whoever it was started charging at me, full on sprinting.
Dude.
I immediately shot up and ran out of the woods to find a new hiding spot in my backyard, but nobody ever came out of the woods. I heard all my friends calling my name from out front, including Joe and Raj, so I assumed something was wrong and went up front. I saw Joe's parents talking with my parents, with all my friends surrounding. My parents seemed a bit relieved to see me, so I was naturally really confused. They told me that a police officer had just passed by and warned them about a serial rapist spotted in the area and that all the kids should stay indoors. I explained what happened to me in the woods, and my parents started freaking out, making 100% sure that I wasn't lying. They called the police. I really don't know if he was ever caught, but I really hope he was. I try not to think about what would have happened to me had whoever that was caught me.
Serial rapist.
Yeah, I don't know which is
When I
worse.
was maybe 12 or 13,
Better serial killer.
me, my mom, my stepdad, and 2 dogs went to the beach for a weekend. We rented an apartment all the way at the back of the shore. The apartment had nothing surreal to it at first sight. We unpacked everything and went out for dinner straight afterwards. We came back and at the time it was maybe 9 p.m. We watched some TV for an hour or so. My mom, stepdad, and 2 dogs slept on a bed you could make from the couch. They gave me the bedroom with a king-sized bed. I went to bed and used my computer for a while to play some games that I had pre-installed since I knew that there would be no internet connection there. I stayed up playing games pretty late at night. I decided it was time to get some shut-eye and go to sleep. Maybe after 5 minutes of laying in my bed, complete silence filled the room. But then, all of a sudden, I hear this extremely loud sigh. I knew it wasn't my
I don't
parents
like
or
that
the dogs,
sigh.
considering the door to the living room was closed. I straight bolted from that room and went to sleep in the bedroom opposite of the master bedroom. My heart was pounding so fast
You
because
just
I was
calm.
absolutely petrified.
So that's crazy.
Needless to say, no sleep was had that night. I told my parents about it the next morning, and they told me it was probably just my imagination, but I was certain it was not. This story still gives me nightmares to this day. I was staying with one of my best friends in North Carolina where I had a job interview. I was coming from New Jersey and my friend Mike offered to let me crash at his place for a few days. He didn't necessarily live too close to the company I was interviewing for, about 2 hours away, but I also just wanted to see one of my good friends again. So this happened after the second interview. I came back to Mike's place in a good mood as I had been offered the job on the spot. We celebrated in the yard that night with a few friends and a few beers, or a lot of beers. We stayed up late and basically got shit-faced. People were coming and going all night. That's the kind of person Mike is. He didn't really keep track of who entered and left his house. So at about 4 in the morning, after everyone had left, we called it a night. I struggled to make it up the stairs and to the bathroom. I drained the snake and soaked my face with hot water, and it was at that moment that I thought I could see something in the corner of my eye. I turned to the half-open door and saw an eye poking in at me through the crack of the door. I let out a loud, holy shit, and in my drunken, klutzy state, I fell to the floor. When I got back on my feet, the eye was gone. I stumbled out of the bathroom and called Mike's name. I heard him call out in response from downstairs in the kitchen. It couldn't have possibly been him. I didn't hear anyone go down the stairs. But I asked if he was up there anyway. Expectedly, he replied with a no. I can't remember fully, but I assume I just brushed it off under the assumption that I had too much to drink. I made it to the guest bedroom and basically fell onto the bed, barely managing to throw the covers over myself. You know when you're drunk you fall asleep easier. That's an
Not
understatement.
me.
I think I fell asleep seconds after falling onto that bed, only to wake up after an unknown duration of sleep. I immediately felt the unbearable headache coming on, and began to rub my head. It was probably a little before sunrise. The room was a bit chilly. My foot was sticking out of the covers, hanging over the edge of the bed. and then it happened. I felt something extremely cold grab onto my foot and start stroking it.
What?
I then heard a raspy voice whisper the words, "Can you help me?" I sat up and
Not if you
screamed at the
fucking
top of
jacked
my
off my
lungs before
foot.
sprinting out of the bed and out of the room, leaving Mike at the top of the stairs. I called the police and they arrived shortly. The intruder was
That's how
actually
you
a
help
woman.
him?
A woman in her late 40s who
Oh
clearly
my
suffered from
God.
some kind of addiction. She admitted to simply walking right into Mike's house and hiding in a closet. The eye I saw was hers, peeking at me while in the bathroom. I always make sure to cover my feet with my sheets now.
That's the least of the things I would do. Lock
You
your
need
doors.
to lock your fucking,
It was the
lock your
dead of winter
doors,
in
man.
Cali. Me and a couple buddies were on a skiing trip by South Lake Tahoe. We stayed in a big luxurious log cabin for a few nights. On the third night during a blizzard, I got up to get a glass of water late in the night. As I crossed the cabin over to the kitchen, there was a frantic knock at the door. I was a bit spooked that somebody would be knocking this late. I thought maybe I should just ignore it and let them go away. But I realized they knew we were there, as my car was parked right outside.
Damn.
I also had the thought that maybe somebody was in trouble and needed to get out of the dangerous weather. I tiptoed over to the door and waited for another knock. It didn't take too long before the knocking came again, this time much louder and more frantic.
See, I don't like that
Who is
crazy
it?
knocking
I asked.
shit. I automatically get in defense
Nobody
mode.
answered. I asked again louder,
It's
but
sketchy.
there was still no answer.
How does a knock
After I
sound
asked
sketchy?
this, there was no more knocking. I grew curious and eventually
Y'all
opened
some
the door a
bitches.
crack with the chain lock still on just in case. Nobody was outside.
Hey, man,
I
crazy
undid the
people out
lock and
there.
opened the door completely. There were
That's true.
footprints in the snow leading away from the cabin. For whatever stupid reason, maybe I felt some kind of guilt and worry for a person in need. I slipped on my boots and jacket and stepped out into the storm to follow the footsteps before they were completely filled.
See, that's
The footsteps led me
He's
to the
looking
edge of
for
the
the crazy
property
shit.
before completely stopping. I shit you not, the footprints completely ended. Not a sign of vehicle marks, a struggle, nothing. It was as if whoever made the tracks was standing still, right where I was. I felt disturbed and ran back into the cabin and slammed the door shut behind me, making sure to lock it. Before I could even gather my thoughts, the frantic knocking at the door resumed.
dude.
My
Yeah,
heart started pounding, and I started to
mad.
scream for my friends. One by one, they all rushed down to see what was wrong. When we opened the door, there was nobody there. The footprints were already filled. I never could prove what happened to my friends. I don't blame them for not believing me. I almost don't believe myself, but I know it happened. I just can't even try to explain it. It still freaks me out to this day. My friend and I were going to a party a few hours out of town, so we decided to stay at her family's holiday house about an hour south of the party.
This should go well.
We arrived around mid-afternoon, and it was winter in a holiday town, so the area was completely empty. No other cars on the street. When we left for the party, I spent a moment deciding whether to pull the gate all the way closed. I'd had some trouble opening it earlier when we arrived, and if we were getting home late at night, I didn't want to be stuck outside.
You know how I know I'm
I ended up
middle-aged?
deciding to shut it for
How's
security.
I'm looking at this
The
thing.
party was great.
I wish I
We
had
got
that
back to
fence
the
in
house
my
around
yard.
12:30, and the
Exactly.
gate was open. I immediately felt on edge because not only did I know that I had locked it, but I knew it couldn't just blow open in the wind. But I didn't want to make a big deal, so I was vague when my friend asked me if I'd shut it. We went inside and decided to make a snack. I was wandering through the house when suddenly my friend raced from the kitchen into the hallway and virtually tackled me to the ground. She was convinced she'd heard someone walking around outside. We tried to calm ourselves down, but we had no cell reception and there was no one else around. Over the next half hour or so, as we sat in the hallway paralyzed with fear, we heard footsteps outside and the back door being jimmied. We decided we had to leave, so we gathered everything up and got ready to make a break for the car. Just as we were at the front door ready to leave, there was a huge bang in the backyard, and suddenly what sounded like hundreds of birds started screaming. We legged it to the car, ended up starting it with all our stuff still on our laps. We hadn't bothered to even put in the back seat. As we reversed out the driveway, we saw somebody running up the side of the house towards us. We sped the entire way home, and didn't sleep at all that night. When I was 10, and my youngest brother Ben was only 1,
Oh, the stairs.
there was this one weekend that my parents were painting our bedrooms, so we would have to sleep in the basement.
You
There was
want
a
those
pull-out
stairs?
couch down there that turned into a bed,
Stairs
and Ben
freak
had an
me out,
extra crib down there.
when they're dark like
I was
that.
only 10, so sleeping in a pitch-dark basement was very uncomfortable.
That reminds
Somehow,
me of the
having
Conjuring.
Ben down there made me feel a bit
Sure,
safer.
yeah. It's probably where you
He
stole
would wake me up
this.
in the middle of the night crying,
from.
and for some
Probably.
reason, tending to him made sleeping down there a little less scary. But it was this one time that I woke up to him screaming. Not crying, screaming, like no 1-year-old should. I was scared shitless immediately and ran over to him to see what was wrong. He was standing up looking at me, pointing to something. I looked in the direction he was pointing at. He was pointing into the pitch-dark boiler room right next to his crib. I felt like 1,000 knives just stabbed me in the chest, and even through the heat of the moment, I vaguely remember the faint sound of something falling over in the boiler room, and I felt as if I was being watched in that basement. I grabbed Ben and got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I have never gone back down in that basement.
I think that was scarier than most of the stories.
Yeah. No, it's good.
I moved to my dad's when I was 10, and I didn't know
seen
anyone
that,
in the
Greg?
area, except for the family my dad
Shutter
was
Island?
friends with. A single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple of years older than me. She was 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple of years. We weren't close, but we ended up having the same friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom, since she knocks a certain way when coming in, and he answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's working schedule. She came in. This is where I don't know the details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbor's house to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her, and left her body naked in a bathtub. She even hid her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. It happened to my wife's grandmother about 15 years ago while we were
What
still
instrument
dating.
is that?
Her husband had just passed away about a year previously, but she'd been going down to the library and volunteering. It was exercise
like
and
a violin.
socialization. This
I
was
did
in the
that
winter,
right.
so her walk back was while it was getting dark. The library closed at 5 and there was some extra stuff to do before everyone actually left. And on this particular night, she turned down a ride from another volunteer because she needed to stay in shape. The house is about a mile away through some lightly wooded area in South Texas, and as she's about halfway home, she notices someone behind her. He's walking the same direction and gaining on her, which in itself isn't all that particular. She's old and thus not particularly fast, but in this case he seems vaguely sinister. They keep walking. Pretty soon he's right behind her. Then he falls into pace, just staying behind her. Now she knows something's up. But she's almost home. She can see the top of her driveway coming up, and she leaves her lights on so it'll look like someone's home when she's walking in. She just needs to make it another 150 yards. Then 100. All that time, she said he was so close that she could feel his breath on her neck. Around maybe 50 yards, it happens. A strong
those
hand on her
feelings.
shoulder. Okay, bitch. Don't turn around and hand over your purse or I'll cut you. She stops for a second, then takes one big step forward, turns, and shoots the guy in the neck with the .38 she keeps in her purse. The guy spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital before he died of complications. My wife's grandmother passed last year, but up to the end, she lamented that she pulled the trigger too soon. When I was young, I'd say 8 to 11-ish, my sister, whom is 7 years older, would babysit when my parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot, and my parents made her smoke outside, of course. So I'd follow her outside, play around, annoy her and such. One day, my sister notices a car at the end of the driveway, just sitting in the road. It's a white SUV with a bike rack on top. It has the most tinted windows I've ever seen. You could not see inside from the side. It sat there until she went inside, then would drive to the end of the road and sit at the church parking lot and wait. Wait until she'd come out again for another smoke. And it would repeat this. Odd, but my sister is a brave lady and just kind of ignored it. That is, until the next day while my parents were out again, and it showed up again. It would sit at the end of the driveway and just watch. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister.
Stalking.
I know, because if I didn't go out, I'd watch from the front window and it would just sit there and watch my sister. She told my father, who was a sheriff deputy at the time, and he called the cops and made a complaint. They showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by and nothing. Then one day, a good 9 months after this had all started and around 4 months since the last sighting, it was back. It became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside doing her nasty habit, and sure enough, here it comes.
It is alarming
This
when
time
you see
we were
shit
all
like
alone
that,
as
though.
usual, and she decides she has had enough.
That's funny.
She tells
We're
me to
out
stay in the
dashing, they
carport
think
and
it's
she's
us.
gonna go confront them. She starts walking toward the
Their
SUV,
neighborhoods.
and halfway down the driveway,
Wow.
she would later remark to us, "I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further, I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear." She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family car was in the shop for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck home for the night. While my parents are home, my sister goes outside to smoke. I go outside with her, and eventually the SUV shows up. She tells me to run inside and tell my father, and I do. My dad promptly gets his gun and starts briskly walking down the driveway with it in hand, in the direction of the SUV, but not leveled towards it. The SUV floored it down the road and peeled out onto the nearby large highway. My dad, being a cop, noted the year and model and distinguishing features. The scariest thing, the license plate had been covered in duct tape. We never saw it again.
What?
That's weird. Why?
The license
I was
plate
just
duct
4 or
tape.
5 years old and my parents
there
had
you
just
go,
separated.
Lawrence.
My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her
Slender
bed
man.
whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of the hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open in her room, which was directly behind the bed above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. I should note her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and woke her up. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took me to wake her up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up at the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of the bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe
The
that
home
the man must
intrusion
have exited
stories
that
more
way.
alarm me than they do
The
scare me.
strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt
It's
and
like,
chain lock.
they just make me second guess.
About a week later,
Hey,
she was
maybe
cleaning
I
the
should lock
kitchen
my
and
door more.
opened up our water heater closet
No, I
and
always
found a
thought
notebook
that.
with names and
Maybe I should
drawings,
lock
Second
my
guess
car
on
as
door.
well
that.
as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. One day while doing my laundry, one of the lights blew out in my basement. My basement is set up
Looks
so
like
that
my
the
old
laundry
basement.
room is split up from the other
Right.
side of the basement with a wall on
Only
the door.
yours was scarier.
Yeah,
In order
it
to
looks
get
like
upstairs,
no
you
good
have to
happens
exit the
in that
laundry
basement.
room and go through the other part of the basement. So the light blew in the other part, not the laundry room. As it was the only light on that side, it was pretty dark. I finished the laundry I had to do while dreading the walk through the dark basement. I exit the laundry room, get halfway through the basement, and I hear a loud cackle. Imagine a sound people make when they imitate a witch. Take that and imagine the witch had been smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and hoarser. That's what I heard, clear as day, right behind me. I didn't hesitate to bolt for the stairs. I waited until my father got home and then changed the bulb. I have yet to hear that cackle since, and I have not told a single person in the house about it.
Man, you lying.
This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it about a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an
Somebody's
English
got
tutor in
Minji.
South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late and the buses stopped running. Being a long
Tutoring.
way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus in the morning. Minji was very reluctant because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her and
Yes, it
eventually she
did.
relented. They went back into her one-room apartment and she got into the bed while he laid a blanket out on the floor and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes Minji up. "I'm really hungry," he says. "Let's go get some food." Minji opens her eyes
Yeah,
and looks
food.
up at him in disbelief.
Food.
"Food? Now? It's 2 a.m. Go back to bed." But the student insists. "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen and he could fix himself some.
Ramen.
This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen. There's a
The last thing
24-hour
anyone
place
wants
just
to
down the road.
hear
Let's go there.
is an option to eat.
Eventually, after
Right.
several minutes of persuasion, the
There's
boy
some
gets
bologna
Minji to come with him to the
sandwiches in there.
restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, "I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They call the police
What
and
the
discover that a
fuck?
homeless man had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under
I
the
don't
bed for
like
2
that.
months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on the floor, so he had a clear view under the bed.
So he
That'd be
straight up
fucked
saw
up.
him in HD.
I was driving a
like he was
shortcut
right
from
next to
29
him.
Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of LA. The shortcut was all 2-lane road through total nothingness, except for a passing through Amboy. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly
Those
as
are the
far
kind of
below
roads I
sea
like
level
right
as
there.
Death Valley. So I was driving by
Why?
myself in the afternoon
'Cause they're
and
pitch
proceeded to
black
drive
when you
up
go
into
down
the
'em
mountain range
at
between
night.
Amboy and I-40.
No lights.
Once I reached the top, I'm driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I
Like
see
that
some
rock and roll
stuff in the middle of
cemetery.
the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes. A suitcase open with clothes
Just as he
scattered
stayed at
everywhere,
29
and two
Palms in
bodies
the
laying
desert.
face down in the road. A man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up.
What's up, Jonathan?
Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull
Hey,
out
what's
a
up, Jonathan?
9mm pistol and chamber
Yo.
around. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Something was just wrong. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it down, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it, or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple of 100 feet and slowed down, so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rear view mirror,
Yes, it is, Jonathan.
I saw that the two bodies had gotten
That's who
up
I'm
to their
borrowing
knees,
from first.
and 20 or so
Then I'll
people emerged
do some
from
of
the
my
tall
other
grass on
favorites.
either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor, and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Some friends and I were doing some night fishing on the James River. We were sitting along the shoreline with a nice fire going, accompanied by the usual idle talk and a few beers, when suddenly, everyone just stopped talking, like a switch was flipped off. We were all staring across the
Travis
river, and
Callahan.
it felt as if something or someone was staring back.
Hey, how you doing?
It was a very uneasy feeling,
Doing
to
well,
which some
just
of the
listen to
group
some
tried to
scary
shake
stories.
off with typical macho humor, when a blood-curdling sound erupted from the other shore that froze everyone in their tracks.
Oh, hell no.
The sound was unlike any other that I had ever heard, and it made every hair on my body vibrate
This
and
too
tingle.
scary for me, man. I gotta get
The
out.
only way I could describe it is it sounded
All
like
right.
a wild person with no language skills being gutted alive. No words, just this high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. Nobody moved or said a word. We all just sat there fixed in our stare, when just as suddenly, a second scream was let loose with even more force than the first.
No, I can't say I've ever watched those, Jonathan.
By this time, several
like
of us were
Corpse
sprinting to our
Husband
trucks
and
that were parked a
also,
few yards away.
The Let's Read
retrieving various
podcast has some
firearms.
really good ones.
When we got
Check
back,
out Mr. Ballin.
we all sat there quietly, with our
He's
eyes
good. And,
fixed,
Dark
staring toward
5.
the opposite shore,
Dark
watching the
5
light
is
from our
good, too.
fire reflecting
Yeah,
off the rocks.
I like his voice for
We
some
sat
reason.
there waiting for
And
another
more than the
scream,
videos.
or something to move on the other side of the river. Finally, a third scream came just as suddenly, but this time, it was on our side of the river, coming from the bushes about a yard away.
Cornelius. What's going
What's
on,
up,
man?
Hayden?
We all hightailed out of there,
That sound like
leaving
Hayden
most of our
screaming.
stuff behind. When we got to our trucks, we heard him scream one more time, just beyond the tree line.
There he is again.
We all floored it the hell away from there, and never found out what was making the sounds.
Bigfoot.
It was a Friday night, and my friend was picking me up in his car from my house.
Dude, got the old
I
school
was in a hurry
DS.
since we were running late for the hockey
Hell
game in the
yeah.
city. The whole car ride there, we were having such a good time
What's with
that
the little
I hadn't
doll
even
under
noticed
the
that I didn't
lamp,
have my
though?
phone.
Like sunbathing.
I searched the car seat, the floor, but it wasn't in the car. I was sure that I had just forgotten it. During the hockey game, I couldn't stop worrying that maybe I had dropped my phone somewhere, so I borrowed my friend's phone and ran to the bathroom. I dialed my number and hoped someone at my house would pick up. It took 3 rings before somebody picked up, but they remained silent on the other end. I yelled into the phone that I was just checking if I had left my phone at home. They didn't answer. I assumed it was my little brother just messing with me, so I hung up. I got home late that night to see that my parents weren't home. I got inside my house and called them to see where they were. They told me that they had gone out to eat and see a concert at the park with my little brother. They said they left soon after I had for the game, and they should be home in around half an hour. So I hung up and proceeded to look for my cell phone. But then I realized, how could somebody in my family have
who
picked
had
up
the
my
phone
phone if they hadn't been home? I felt a pain in my stomach as fear swept over.
Shit.
It was at that moment that I heard the back door to my house open and close. I immediately jolted out the front door to the neighbors and called the police. Apparently, the back door was left open and somebody had simply walked into our house. Nothing was stolen, but the scariest thing is the thought that we could have fallen asleep with a stranger in the house.
A lot of invasion stories.
A while back, there was a family that moved in next door to my family. They had a son who was just twisted. He was obsessive over slasher movies and always wanted me to talk about
this
shit
is
that
us.
happened during my time serving in Vietnam that no normal person would want to hear. He also loved tormenting stray animals. This guy was a whack job. He was 19 at the time and my daughter was 7, but he always wanted to talk to her. He'd strike up conversation with her when she walked home from school. He would talk over the fence at her when she was playing in the back. But what really set me off was when he called our house looking to speak to her. That was it. I went over and flipped shit at him and his parents. Told him to stay the hell away from her and I'd better not ever see him again. That's when things got weird. My daughter was always a little imaginative.
It wasn't
and
already
paranoid.
weird.
She would think there were monsters under her bed and whatnot. So when she told me there was something living in her closet and she was too scared to get up and tell us at night, but it wasn't there in the daytime, we blew it off as no big deal. A few weeks went by and one night my wife and daughter were staying at my mother's for a girls'
Oh
night.
man, this is about
So
done.
I turned the key on the HBO box and watched me some movies, eventually falling asleep downstairs. At around 2 a.m., I get a call from my neighbor with a creepy son telling me something along the lines of, "We saw that you were up, so we called. Our son is missing. I went by his room to use the bathroom and his door was open, which isn't usual, and there was no sign of him. We need help looking for him."
Oh no.
The phone call woke me up though. I wasn't up. So I asked why they thought I was. "Oh, we saw you walking around upstairs and the light is on." My blood ran cold as ice. I'd been passed out on the couch and I know no one turned any lights on. I hung up on them, ran outside to my truck to grab my shotgun, but noticed the sheriff pulling up to my neighbor's house by this point. I booked it over and told him there was someone in my house, and now I could see the lights in my daughter's room were on, and there was a silhouette pacing back and forth. When the deputies went in, they found the neighbor boy there waiting in my daughter's room with a nice little setup in her closet. He said he liked to watch her sleep in the moonlight.
That's fucking weird.
Yeah, you need to be in jail. Holy shit.
All right, so
What are your thoughts?
that was the last one of that.
That's the only one you remembered.
No, that wasn't what I remembered. I just picked. I picked 5 random ones. I think I think there was 5 of them altogether. But the lesson I've learned tonight is lock your car doors and lock your fucking windows and front door,
Right.
because most of those were home invasion stories.
Question for you guys, since I'm not too familiar with like the whole Mr. Nightmare and all that stuff. What's the genesis of like these stories? Are they just stories, or are there any truth based in them?
Well, all of those were supposed to be true. Like,
Yeah, you'll find them like on Reddit and forums where you have like share real stories.
and
that are pretty
like Mr. Nightmare and a lot of these other ones like that, they'll do different types of stories. They'll do, invasion stories, just anything of the weird, honestly. Sometimes it'll be paranormal stuff. Like when I batch them together, I'm going to try to keep them similar as far as like what they're talking about. Like I don't want to mix ghost with crazy
military
arrest stories.
secrets
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
So, but I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, UFO stories, like people sightings on that. So, as I progress forward, we'll add different topics.
Cool.
For an opener, I wish the stories would have been a little scarier, honestly, a little creepier. But as we go on, they'll get better. Corey, I will ask you in preparation for tomorrow. Have you got your top 10 list?
Oh, I need to work on that. I'll do that tonight.
I actually just did mine while we were on the show.
While we were dashing, actually, I reminded you.
Yeah, I was gonna totally forget about it.
I was got a question that's kind of related to this in terms of creepiness. What do you think is the creepiest one of your favorite creepy scenes from a movie?
If I had to go right off the top of my head, I mean, the thing that instantly comes to me is those damn tapes from Sinister.
Yeah, that's a good one. You know what? You're probably going to remember one of my favorites is, and Hayden loves this movie too, but the damn scene in Lost Highway.
Oh, yeah.
He calls him from his house.
Yeah. I would have never saw that scene if it wasn't for you, and I think we've watched it.
Corey, why can't you pick a movie I've seen before, man?
You should watch Lost Highway. It's good.
Oh,
who's in that?
I think
Bill Pullman's and Patricia Arquette are the main.
I guess Travis Callahan is back. He must have He must have found his balls to join us since he got scared earlier, but
Yeah.
here we go.
What movie's Corey talking about?
Lost Highway.
Oh, hell yeah. That David Lynch?
Yep.
Oh, hell yeah. I love it.
That's a good one right there, boy.
Oh, hell yeah, baby. You ever seen Tiger King?
I haven't.
There's a great show with my cousin.
No, I was gonna say, were you in it?
Is that
Nah, I ain't in it, but my cousin Joe, he was in that damn thing.
Joe Dirt.
Sure.
That was one nickname they called him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
How y'all doing?
Doing good.
doing well. Just wrapping up here.
You wrapping up?
You always got to
Yeah,
wrap
man.
up. It's important.
Don't wrap up yet. Hold on. I'm gonna take a shit right now. Hold on.
That's more terrifying than anything I just heard.
Hold on. How was the creepypasta? Is that pretty scary?
They were decent.
Seemed pretty scary. I'm a pussy. I like shooting guns and spanking women. That's about all I do.
Well, all right.
Travis, what if the women don't like it though?
Well, they just got to deal with it. Out here in the country, ain't nobody hear him scream.
That's true.
Pretty nice.
Appreciate it, Jess. Yeah, we're gonna definitely bring in some more. I think next time we'll go with the ghost and ghoulies.
No, but Corey, to answer your question of the favorite scary scenes, you seen Willow Creek, the one with the Bigfoot found footage?
Good one.
I still haven't seen that one yet.
They have one scene.
It's
in
kind
there.
of funny that you
Spoil
haven't
it.
seen it, Corey, because you're the one who recommended it to me.
No, I recommended what's that one called? That the Blair Witch guy did. Fuck is that called? Exists? Is that what it's called?
I believe so.
Yeah, what's up, guys?
Hey, what's going on, man?
My cousin Travis, he told me he jumped in there for a
So
minute.
Hayden, we were talking about like our favorite like scary like a scene from a movie that's like
Yeah.
a creepy scene. Which one would be your favorite creepy scene from a movie?
Well, did Corey already use the Lost Highway one
He did.
where he says he's inside the house or whatever?
Yeah.
That's one of mine. I don't know. Somebody asked me this recently, and I couldn't come up with a good answer.
My answer was I said the scene in Sinister when he was watching the tapes
Oh yes,
because those fucked with me, man.
That-
I mean,
that's one of my all-time favorite scary, creepy moments. Especially
No.
the lawnmower.
oh yeah.
I love that
Oh, my
lawnmower,
God.
man. And the fucking car on fire was crazy too. I hate that one.
Yeah.
Just the opening with the family hanging, and it's like
Yeah,
a slow
because on that one you were wondering, you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah. God, that movie's one of the creepiest I've ever seen.
No, I know. No, for me, remember that scene in Blair Witch Project where like the dude at the end is sitting in the corner and it's like quiet.
That's good. That's a good one.
Right, it ends because you heard the story in the beginning of the movie about how he made the kid sit in the corner.
That is a
while
good
he
one.
killed the one, yeah, and it kind of replays itself. Man.
You know what's so good about that scene too is you got the first, like they show both cameras footage in that scene. So like he gets like hit, and then she's headed. They show her footage right after that, and she's going down those stairs, and like what she's headed towards. And you're especially the first time you watch that, you don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
That fucked with me.
So Hayden, tomorrow's episode, with the SlackerCast, we're doing a top 10 horror movies list.
Ooh.
So if you want to join in and come up with one, I already got mine done. Lawrence has his done. I think Corey's still working on his.
What time are you guys doing it?
Probably 9:30 or a little after. That's usually when I'm done door dashing. So
PM, I assume.
yeah, PM.
Well, wait, tomorrow?
You don't have an excuse, dude. Today was Memorial Day, so tomorrow there's no holiday.
I'll be at work probably I'll probably get home around 10 if I'm lucky. So if you guys are still on,
we'll definitely.
We'll definitely still be on.
Catch up, yeah.
Yeah, just join in after, and you can give us we might still be going through ours, and you can just catch up if not.
Yeah, nothing so scary like 9:30 in the morning.
Well, I mean, I assumed you didn't mean 9:30 in the morning, but man, that would be scary. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. It's 6 a.m. and it's time for Creepy Classics. Let's go.
Get your cup of coffee and shit for work.
Well, I caught this show late, but were you guys just watching a bunch of scary stuff and different YouTube channels?
Yeah.
Dude, I love that stuff.
Well, actually, let me. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this show up so we can just talk after. But just want to thank everyone for listening. Check us out on our other podcast, the SlackerCast. Also, check out S'mores Indoors. They just relaunched, so a lot of good content coming there. And also check out Hayden's channel there, the Cornelius Collection. Some oddball stuff there as well.
Cable Channel 11.
And Cable Channel 11
yes,
also,
yeah.
Jess's channel. Yes. Check that out as well.
And Jonathan streamed tonight too.
Jonathan did stream. So.
Did. He had Daniel on there, didn't he?
Give everybody a like and a sub. Support small streamers. That's what I always say, especially on Twitter. But until next time, we're going to head out of here. Join us next week for Creepy Classics episode 2.
All right, slack off.